And welcome to another Sportsnaut interview. And our guest today is Eric Henry, who is a Texas football beat writer for Horns 24/7, part of the 24/7 network. And Eric, obviously, we have you on here today to talk about Texas Longhorn football. I want to first start. We're gonna talk about the decision by Steve Sarkisian last week he briefly benched Quinn Ewers in that game against Georgia. And what it could mean for the Longhorns going forward. Now, I understand why he did it. I've heard some of his comments, after the game and this week. But do you think it's possible that he inadvertently may have created a quarterback controversy with what he did last week?
Yeah, first off, Evan, appreciate you having me on. I don't think it's just possible. I mean, it's very much a reality. And it's really interesting. You talk about hearing Steve Sarkisian's comments post game and also in the halftime interview. And forgive me for this long-winded answer, but you can't fully understand those comments without having the 2 years of background to fully understand it. So obviously Arch Manning signs with Texas and arrives early and prior to the 2023 season looking to compete for the starting job. At that time, it was still an open competition between Arch Manning, Quinn Ewers, and now Duke starter Malik Murphy. Mm-hmm. Quinn Ewers was by far the better quarterback of the two. Arch Manning was still early in his career. Malik, for all of the things that he's doing now at Duke, still very much an inconsistent player, very much what he exhibited at Texas. From that moment on, Evan, Steve Sarkisian has been just in lockstep with Quinn Ewers as far as that's my guy. That's my quarterback. Dismissing any question, whether it was locally in Austin or nationally, as far as is there a door for Arch Manning? Now, we all know if you sign anyone with the last name Manning, and especially someone with the five-star potential and just the tantalizing kind of traits that Arch exhibits, if media folks are looking for any reason, and I would say that including myself, and I'm not trying to remove myself from the conversation, to see, hey, what is there? So that's what made the move last week so surprising. The fact that even Thursday, leading up to that game, Steve Sarkisian was asked by a local member of the Austin media, hey, what would it take for you to make a move in game? Steve dismissed the question wholeheartedly, saying, I don't know what type of question that is. Next question. 48 hours later, he makes that exact move. So for all of the way that he's tried to kind of handle this over the past 14, 15 months with Arch Manning being on campus, that one move has really opened the door for a lot of the conversation we have heading into Vandy.
Yeah. Now, what would happen, let's say, hypothetically, Ewers struggles a bit this week or maybe next week? Does he go to Manning again, or does he – obviously his main goal is to win the football game. I understand that. And he's going to put in whoever he feels will give them the best opportunity. But if he makes this move again, he's going to have a lot of fans, I'm sure, continuing to get louder about wanting to see more Manning. So will he go to Manning again if he needs to?
Again, that's what makes it so tricky, right? If you'd asked me this question 7 days ago, I would have said no. You ask it to me now, and I just wrote this. And I hate to be a bad guest, but the best answer I have for you is I don't know. The reason I say I don't know is if you go back to Arch Manning again in a game that Quinn Ewers doesn't finish, you can't go back to Quinn Ewers again. It's as simple as that. Quinn's a bit of a shy kid, really humble, kind of a shyer kid. And, the way Texas post games go, obviously Steve Sarkisian speaks first, then the players come afterwards. And when Steve said, hey, we felt that need to get Quinn's eyes right and give him a chance to kind of watch the game from the sideline and allow Arch to spark the offense. When Quinn Ewers came in, I asked him, was the second question was asked. I said, Quinn, did you feel like you needed that time from the sideline to kind of recalibrate? And Quinn was just like, well, I guess I did. I mean, he looked almost just as confused in the post game as to when it happened. And then he, to give him credit, he did say, hey, I came in and played well in the second half for a couple touchdowns. But if you make that move again and Quinn Ewers doesn't have a fundamental understanding of why the move is being made, quarterback is just like pitcher, is just like a golfer. Once you lose your confidence, the mental aspect, you're finished. So the reason I say I don't know is because I don't think you can make that move and expect to go back to Quinn Ewers at any point in this season.
Yeah. And real quick, Ewers has not been as effective as he was when he's, to start the season following the injury. Just some numbers here. He was completing 73% of his passes with a touchdown to interception ratio of 8-2. That was prior to the injury. Since returning from the injury, he's completing only 62% of his passes with a TD interception ratio of 2 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. So I know he played better in the second half against Georgia, but his play has gone down a little bit. So again, Sarkisian could see himself in the situation where he may have to make that decision once again. Let's get back to the game though, the loss to Georgia. The word that I kept hearing on the TV and when I was reading more about the game online is the word physicality, and how Georgia really dominated Texas in the trenches. Do you think what you saw in the game last weekend, do you think some larger weaknesses may have been exposed in that game versus Georgia?
I wouldn't go as far as to say larger weaknesses, because this is a Texas team that, if you go back last year, and most people will say, some people will say, all right, that was the Big 12, this is the SEC. But Texas had no problem playing in the trenches, being a physical football team, running the ball, closing out games. Look no further than the way they closed out Alabama week 2 last year, right? I think this was a byproduct of some of the issues that Texas has had this year that have, quite frankly, they've been able to kind of cover up by really quick starts on offense and, a really standout defense, most notably the run game. Steve Sarkisian and I kind of go back and forth a little bit in the early part of the season, he was finding big chunk plays in the run game. And for your audience, this to give background, this is a running back room that suffered injuries to C.J. Baxter, who would have been the co-starter with Jaden Blue entering the year, and also 4-star true freshman Christian Clark. So the room was already thin, but they were finding these big chunk plays, but they weren't necessarily finding the 5, 6, 7-yard carries that they were getting last year from Baxter and Jonathan Brooks, and even going back the year prior to Bijan Robinson. So I usually ask Steve, say, hey, does it concern you that, you're getting the chunk plays and your red zone efficiency is performing really well, so you're getting points, but you're getting these 40, 45-yard runs or getting, 2, 3-yard runs. And he said, hey, listen, if I look up the box score and I see 300 yards passing, 200 yards rushing, I'm going to take that. Well, we saw what happened when you couldn't run the ball. The whole offense looked out of whack. So I wouldn't say that this was a team that was out physical. Now, yes, Georgia is certainly a notch up, a level up in physicality than you faced prior to playing them. That is no doubt. And that they'll have to match if they're going to have a chance to win the SEC. But I think this was more of an issue of just the perfect storm of offensive inefficiency and all the things that Texas kind of hadn't been doing right, all coming together in one game.
Yeah, and I think Georgia really came prepared for this game. They had a good game plan going in, and you could tell those guys were really fired up to play in this game. So this week, Texas, they head out on the road. First SEC road game here. They go to Nashville to take on Vanderbilt, 25th ranked Vanderbilt. They've surprised some people this year, and this is a team that we know they upset Alabama earlier in the year. They played Missouri very tough as well, so not a team to be taken lightly by Texas. Not that I think they will, coming off the loss to Georgia, but how do you think the team will respond following the loss?
When we talked with the guys during the week, they all, in the immediacy of the loss, you could tell they were shell-shocked, because I think they realized that wasn't their best performance, and I think they realized, hey, A, they had greater expectations for themselves, and B, understood that in the SEC, you can't have your B game. You can't have your B- game. Sometimes you can't have your A- game. You got to bring it. And now going to this game against Vandy, I'll be curious to see how the offense responds. Evan, this is a team that's shown that they play best when they're playing from ahead. And of course, listen, I'm saying, well, what team doesn't? But especially with Texas, as I mentioned, not necessarily having the strongest of run games in the way that it's looked in years past, it is crucial for them to develop an early lead, so then they can pound teams and kind of exhibit some of that physicality that you questioned that you questioned, that they can exhibit that in the second half of games when they choose to close teams out with the run. But this is still a Texas defense that's phenomenal. They're number 1 in the nation in points per game allowed at 9.6, forcing a lot of turnovers. Keeping an eye on injury in the secondary. Andrew Makuba, starting safety, is questionable. He's doubtful for the game. Isaiah Bond, wide receiver, is questionable. So those two injuries will certainly play a factor. But in my mind, I think Texas will respond. Texas is the better team. Diego Pavia certainly is a magical player. I covered him even going back to his time at New Mexico State when I was covering Conference USA. Certainly capable in the way Vandy plays. They can grind the clock. They're ninth in the nation in time of possession. But all in all, I think Texas understands what they have at stake, and you can't go into the rest of the season and possibly an SEC title game as a 2-loss team. That's asking too much for your college football playoff hope. So I think Texas bounces back, and I do think that they'll win at least by a couple scores.
Yeah, 18.5-point favorites the last time I looked. Now, you just mentioned the college football playoff, and this is the final topic that I wanted to ask you about. Is there any concern, within the program that, even in this new expanded 12-team playoff, I was looking at some of the latest projections over at The Athletic and some other websites. They have Texas currently number 7 in their projections. 2 losses. Is there a chance that if they should slip up, and I was looking at the schedule, we mentioned they play Vanderbilt this week, still games with Florida, Arkansas, Kentucky, and then a season finale at Texas A&M. Any concerns that an upset loss could really jeopardize their chances of getting in?
I'm on the record, Evan, is saying it's a 3-loss SEC team is not going to make the college football playoff. So if you're entering, and let's just say Texas or any other team, because basically all of them have losses, go into the SEC title game with 2 losses. If you lose that game, you're done. So to the question you asked me in terms of this week with Vandy, they need to win. Of course, you have the tiebreakers and other scenarios. What would that look like if they were a 2-loss team outside of the SEC title game? I guess that could leave a little bit of room to maybe sneak in, because I could easily see 3 SEC teams, or not easily. I do see 3 SEC teams making the college football playoff. And if that were the case, I guess that would provide a little bit of wiggle room. But at the end of the day, no. I think for Texas, as far as they're concerned, they need to run the table, and then probably looking at it being an SEC title game, a rematch with Georgia, you lose that one again, you'll still get in. Yeah. But I think anything more than that is really pushing it. And I don't see a 3-loss SEC team in the playoff. Yeah,
every game matters here for Texas down the stretch. Eric Henry, everyone, from the Horns 24/7, part of the 24/7 network. We appreciate all your time. I know you're out there in Nashville right now, so I hope you get a chance to have a little fun while you're out there. Thanks for joining us today.
No worries. Appreciate it.